viewers of KPFK Pacifica Radio in Los Angeles, this is Uprising and I'm Sonali Kohatkar. It's Monday, July 20th, 2015. Planned Parenthood faces yet another round of attacks from the right after an undercover video was edited to give the appearance that the abortion provider is running a business on selling fetal tissue. RH Reality Check's Jodi Jacobson will join us. And activists and survivors testified at an International People's Tribunal on human rights abuses in the Philippines will speak with one of the witnesses. Plus, the media watchdog group FAIR examines the whiteness of NPR in a cleverly titled report, Some Things Considered by Mostly White Men. That's coming up after the news. Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Rahul Mahajan. He's a sociologist and author of Full Spectrum Dominance. Hi, Rahul.
Hi, Sonali.
The Turkish border town of Suruk is the site of a deadly bombing this morning. 28 people were killed when an apparent suicide attack targeted a political meeting. Suruk is located close to the Syrian border town of Kobani, where major battles between Kurdish fighters and the Islamic State have taken place. Turkey's government has labeled it a terrorist attack. The bombing comes just days after a suicide attack killed 115 people in Iraq. A crowded marketplace in the eastern Iraqi province of Diyala, bordering Iran, was attacked on Friday when a truck detonated. There were many women and children among the dead in what was the deadliest attack in Iraq in 10 years. Islamic State militants immediately took credit for that attack. Rahul, what does ISIS gain by killing so many civilians? And it seems as though the U.S.'s efforts to curb ISIS has made no difference.
Well, this is speculation, but I think basically the strategic mobilization of terror is a major part of ISIS's military strategy. It may have been in some ways militarily superior to some of the forces that it's fought to achieve the success it has, but right now it's beleaguered, and certainly with the addition of the U.S. Air Force, even in the very limited capacity it is now, it's definitely outmatched militarily, but it's still able to occasionally win victories by terrorizing populations and by creating incentives in local fighting forces to not to fight, to disappear, or to submit. So I think that's part of it. They also justify the killing of civilians with a twin-pronged strategy of saying that anyone who's a true Muslim who is killed in such an attack is a martyr and goes to heaven. And of course, you have to remember that for them, most Muslims are not actually Muslims. They excommunicate those they disagree with.
And then here in the United States, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has angered members of his own party after making outrageous comments about Senator John McCain. At a summit in Iowa on Saturday, Trump was asked about McCain, who spent 5 years at a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam during the war. He responded saying he thought McCain was, quote, not a war hero, and then added, he's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? Former Texas Governor Rick Perry and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, both of whom are vying for the GOP nomination, were among many Republicans who immediately slammed Trump, saying he was unfit to be president. McCain responded by saying, I think he may owe an apology to the families of those who have sacrificed in conflict and those who have undergone the prison experience in serving their country. Trump has also come under attack recently for making racist comments about Mexican immigrants. Well, Rahul, don't the Republicans reveal just how morally bankrupt they are by all these ridiculous antics?
Well, I mean, Trump's existence, his reincarnation as a bigoted, ignorant fool, basically, is absolutely a sign of the depravity of a large part of the Republican Party. And let's hope that he's so over the top in his offensiveness that it wakes up at least a few of them. That said, his remarks about McCain are, while ridiculous from a man who didn't serve in combat nor honorably as an anti-war activist, are not nearly as offensive as earlier comments like the ones in which he called Mexican immigrants rapists. So the fact that this is being made such a big deal of really has more to do with the sort of mindset of imperialism and the idolatry of the U.S. military than the overt depravity of the remarks themselves.
And finally, Democrats were also embarrassed over the weekend when Liberal presidential candidates Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley were interrupted on stage by activists with the Black Lives Matter movement. At the Netroots Nation Conference, which is the largest annual gathering of progressives in the country, Sanders and O'Malley appeared in Phoenix to rally their base. BLM activists accused them of not centering racial justice as part of their political platforms. They chanted the names of black women who had been killed in police custody. O'Malley clumsily retorted that Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, all lives matter. While Sanders said, quote, "I spent 50 years of my life fighting for civil rights and dignity, but if you don't want me to be here, that's okay. I don't want to outscream people," end of quote. BLM co-founder Patrisse Cullors, who's appeared twice on Uprising, was among those who challenged the candidates. She said, "We are in a state of emergency. If you do not feel that emergency, then you are not human. I want to hear concrete action plans." Rahul, can BLM's tactics to challenge Democratic presidential candidates in this way work?
Well, I think it's good that they did this and brought attention to the fact that Democratic candidates have to say it. And by the way, I give Sanders credit. I mean, both he and O'Malley were obviously annoyed by the interruption, but Sanders didn't try to pander condescendingly the way that O'Malley did, but actually said what he thought. So give him some credit for that. But they're going to have to be very careful about their tactics. I mean, remember the main candidate is going to be Hillary Clinton, whether you like it or not. And the Clintons are already known for the strategic selection of sister soldier moments. So they have to be careful because they have a cause which tremendous number of people agree with, and not just Democrats either. And they agree not just that it's wrong to kill all these people without guns, but even that we need to start imposing serious accountability on the police. And they have to be careful not to be sort of separated from that support by denunciation of their tactics.
Rahul, thanks as always for your analysis. We'll talk to you again next week.
See you then.
Rahul Mahajan is a sociologist and author of Full Spectrum Dominance, U.S. Power in Iraq and Beyond. This is Uprising. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. Right-wing evangelical activists are celebrating another stealth attack on the group Planned Parenthood. The heavily edited video, which made waves in the media this week, is designed to appear as though Planned Parenthood is in the business of profiting off of aborted fetuses for medical testing. The group, going by the Orwellian name of Center for Medical Progress, invited Planned Parenthood's Senior Director of Medical Services, Dr. Deborah Nucatola, to a restaurant and secretly filmed her for over 2 hours. They then edited down the video to a few minutes and posted it online with a provocative opening. Here are the first few minutes of that video. And we're going to play that video for you in just a few minutes. In reality, of course, women who have abortions choose to donate their fetal tissue for important medical research. And the only costs associated with the transactions are for transportation. So we want to play for you a short excerpt of the video that was posted online now.
Now a story we guarantee most of you have never heard before. Big money is being made from the sale of fetal body parts.
Even the most ardent pro-choice advocates, like Planned Parenthood President Gloria Feld, are disturbed by what we found.
It seems inappropriate, totally inappropriate. Where there is wrongdoing, it should be prosecuted and should be brought to justice.
A lot of people want intact parts these days because they're looking for specific nodes. AV nodes, SA. I was like, wow, I didn't even know. Good for them. Yesterday was the first time she said people wanted longer. And then, but like I said, always as many intact
No, a dime a dozen.
Those are the opening minutes of the video that was posted online by the Center for Medical Progress. But the GOP-dominated Congress has already planned hearings in a first step to try to strip Planned Parenthood of federal funding yet again. House Speaker John Boehner went as far as to say last week, quote, "I think I'd vomit trying to talk about the video." The Attorneys General of Ohio and Texas have used the video as a jumping-off point to investigate Planned Parenthood, as have a number of others. Joining me now is Jodi Jacobson. She's the editor-in-chief of RH Reality Check. Welcome to Uprising, Jodi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, the video is clearly edited in such a way as to make it seem as though Planned Parenthood is harvesting the organs of aborted fetuses to sell them, and that is driving their abortion procedures. The video opens on screen with U.S. laws that are in place against the trafficking of human tissue for profit, and that is, of course, a deliberate juxtaposition, right?
Yes. It's a deliberate juxtaposition that even if you go to the site of the so-called Center for Medical Progress, they have a transcript there of the entire unedited discussion, which shows that the edited video is a farce. But I think it's really important for people to understand several things. One, there is a federal ban on the selling of any human tissue, but there is a great demand for human tissue in research. And what any organization is allowed to do, Planned Parenthood or any other organization, is to cover the cost of storing and mailing tissue. So that is what Planned Parenthood does. Now, do they encourage women to donate tissue? No, they offer that just like in any other medical procedure, or just like I have a donor card, they offer that as one option for a woman who might be wanting to donate tissue after an abortion. Every piece of this is completely legal. Every piece of it goes according to federal law. And so no law has been broken. And let's also just step back for a moment to understand that the people involved here, including Troy Newman, who is a member or president of Operation Rescue, hate Planned Parenthood, hate women's health care with a passion. And most of them have an agenda of destroying Planned Parenthood. So this is where this video comes from.
Right, and of course, the name, the Center for Medical Progress, should really be not taken seriously because, as you pointed out, the motivations of those who created it are quite clear. So when this person who was stealthily videotaped, Dr. Deborah Nucatola, when she was videotaped and showing her discussing costs, which the video tries to play off as a cost of organs or the price of organs, this is really the cost of storage and transportation, and they're very small costs, relatively
Yes,
speaking.
when you go to the transcript, and when you also, as Media Matters for America has done, compare the original almost 3-hour video with the snippets they show, you will see that the timestamps show that the video has been cut up. So she's being asked completely different questions, and then they are sliced or spliced, I guess, together to make it seem like she's answering the questions they want you to think she's answering. So bottom line is, human tissue is used in a lot of research. Fetal tissue has been used, for example, to create the polio vaccine, the rubella vaccine, many other medical advances. This is someone like myself, maybe like you, who goes and decides that they cannot go through with a pregnancy and wants to use the tissue to advance medical research. This is really not about Planned Parenthood. It's about the decisions of individual people. The costs that are able to be covered, and if you want to look up federal law, I encourage your listeners to do so, says that you may cover the cost $30 to $100 of storage and shipping. And there's no profit there whatsoever.
I want to play the video response by Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards. She apologized for the tone of Dr. Deborah Nucatola, who, of course, didn't know she was being videotaped. Here's Cecile Richards.
Hello, I'm Cecile Richards, President of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Planned Parenthood provides a full range of healthcare services to millions of women, men, and young people every year, including cancer screenings, birth control, STD testing and treatment, and abortion. And we provide much more than health services. We support millions of people as they build their futures and pursue their goals. Recently, an organization that opposes safe and legal abortion used secretly recorded heavily edited videos to make outrageous claims about programs that help women donate fetal tissue for medical research. I want to be really clear. The allegation that Planned Parenthood profits in any way from tissue donation is not true. Our donation programs, like any other high-quality healthcare providers, follows all laws and ethical guidelines. Over our 100-year history, we've continually engaged leading medical experts to shape our practices, policies, and high standards, and we always will. Our top priority is the compassionate care that we provide. In the video, one of our staff members speaks in a way that does not reflect that compassion. This is unacceptable, and I personally apologize for the staff member's tone and statements. As always, if there's any aspect of our work that can be strengthened, we want to know about it and we take swift action to address it. Planned Parenthood stands behind our work to help women and families donate tissue for medical research when they wish to. It is always their decision. And I thank those women and families who have chosen tissue donation at some point in their lives. Your commitment to life-saving research, developing treatments for diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, is important and compassionate, and it should be respected, not attacked. We know the real agenda of organizations behind videos like this, and they have never been concerned with protecting the health and safety of women. Their mission is to ban abortion completely and to cut women off from care at Planned Parenthood and other health centers, and we will never let that happen.
Cecile Richards is the president of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Now, Jodi Jacobson, editor-in-chief of RH Reality Check, you're our guest today. What do you make of this response? Because, of course, it's crucial to do immediate damage control. Planned Parenthood now is used to being the target of these kinds of attacks from the right. Do you think that Richards did the right thing and said it in the right way?
Well, I think Cecile needs to make obvious decisions for the purposes of Planned Parenthood, and they have decisions to make. I would like to challenge anyone to think that you could be secretly taped, then edited in your normal daily life when you think you're speaking to a trusted colleague, or to your kids for that matter, and not have it come out looking bad if somebody wants to make it look bad. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, I had an exchange with my son last week in which the bottom line is we were kidding, but you know, if you took a couple of the sentences that I said to him and spliced them out of context, you could, you know, make that look bad too. We have to remember that providers work under tremendous pressure. They are human beings, they are doctors, they're providing essential services. And to expect them to be more perfect than anyone else is really a travesty. And this whole video is part of an ongoing campaign. I mean, you know, one day they're attacking Planned Parenthood for one thing, another day they're attacking it for another thing. And I want to say one thing about the group that did this video. They were affiliated with Live Action Films, which has put out a number of its own set of videos, all of which have been discredited. So they purposefully created a different organization under a different name so as not to be affiliated with their previous films. This is sleight of hand of the grossest kind. And I think that to waste taxpayer dollars, as many in Congress are promising to do, to quote unquote investigate Planned Parenthood, is just that, a travesty and a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Now, Jodi, on rhrealitycheck.org, you wrote a piece that was entitled Profiting from Fetal Body Parts? The GOP Sure Is. Can you tell us how Republicans are disgustingly fundraising for their campaigns from this video, using this video and the damage it's created?
Okay, so it's a really good question because we found out last week from reporting by Roll Call on the Hill. Roll Call is a DC-based news organization that, in fact, members of Congress knew about this video a month ago and didn't do anything about it. Why? Because this has been all timed before the Republican GOP first presidential debate. And what happened immediately after the video went out was that innumerable fundraising emails went out from each of the candidates, from Marco Rubio to Rick Perry to Scott Walker. asking people to give money for this witch hunt for Planned Parenthood. In other words, to fund their campaigns to conduct a witch hunt against Planned Parenthood. So yes, the GOP presidential contenders and many of the groups like Americans United for Life, and I would say, so-called United for Life, and other groups like that sent out fundraising videos. So this is clearly one of those, let's throw red meat to the base and let's profit off of it. So if anyone's profiting off of a false controversy around fetal body parts, it is the GOP.
And you talked about on your website, there is analysis showing how so many of those Republican politicians who are trying to use this to further their agenda are themselves, have shady pasts, such as Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is under investigation for fraud. I mean, many of these are folks whose whose morality itself is under serious question, but they seem to want to take a very strong moral stand on this issue.
Absolutely. Well, the GOP is all about morals until it applies to them. That's clear. And yes, Paxton, our senior reporter in Texas, Andrea Grimes, wrote a piece about Paxton, who has been under investigation for some time and is continued under investigation for felony, basically. And we believe that this is just another way of diverting attention from his own problems. And I would question the claims of morality. How moral is it to deny people access to health care, which is being done across Texas and across many of these other states? How moral is it to deny people fair wages, which the GOP is doing? How moral is to take away people's employment benefits, which Scott Walker is doing? This is all a diversion from the immoral policies of the GOP, trying to blame women's health care for something as a complete diversion. And that's all it is.
And what do you also make, Jodi, of mainstream media coverage of this story? Some media outlets do seem to have pointed out the irresponsible way in which this video was put together. But did you see a lot of uncritical reporting as well?
Yes, I have seen uncritical reporting by the Washington Post, for example.
Really?
Yes, a piece there that, what happens is that, ask yourself, why would a newspaper report on an organization's video that was obviously cut before looking at the full length of the video? And why would it report on the video of an organization known to be affiliated with anti-choice groups without critically investigating that video? And we've seen that happen by BuzzFeed, by Washington Post, and by several others, where claims about the video become headlines, which reinforces the sense that somehow Planned Parenthood did something wrong, when in fact they did nothing wrong. So I find that to be irresponsible. If journalism, good journalism, is supposed to be about informing the public and promoting the public good, then those outlets that are doing such reporting are failing miserably at that.
Well, Jodi, give out the website for your organization where our audience can read a little bit more nuanced and realistic coverage of this issue.
Yes, thank you so much. It's RH Reality Check. So it's www.rhrealitycheck, all one word, .org.
And we'll post that to our website, uprisingwithsonali.com, later today. Thanks so much, Jodi, for your work.
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you so much.
Jodi Jacobson is the editor-in-chief of RH Reality Check, which is online at rhrealitycheck.org. This is Uprising. When we come back, we'll go live to the Philippines. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. Activists in Washington, D.C. are marching today to draw attention to human rights abuses in the Philippines. On Friday, a group of advocacy organizations, such as the National Lawyers Guild, organized a 3-day International People's Tribunal on the Philippines. Among those who testified were Melissa Rojas, a Los Angeles-based activist who was abducted by government forces during a humanitarian trip to the Philippines, and she was tortured during her detention. Today's march is the culmination of the tribunal. It'll head to the White House and State Department. The tribunal sought to draw attention to widespread human rights abuses that have occurred under the leadership of President Benigno S. Aquino, who enjoys good relations with the U.S. government and the Obama administration. There have been 226 documented extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. And on July 15th, several of those who testified at the tribunal also gave a briefing to the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission of the U.S. Congress. The International People's Tribunal will submit its findings to the United Nations and various governments and international organizations. Joining me now live from the Philippines is Eliza Maza. She is a former member of parliament in the Philippines. She was scheduled to testify at the tribunal, but was barred from boarding her flight to the U.S. Welcome to Uprising, Liza.
Yes, good morning to everyone. Good morning, America.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, first, can you explain why you aren't in Washington, D.C. right now? What happened to you?
Well, I was supposed to board my plane via Korean Airlines last July 9, but 35 minutes before boarding, and that was after I had undergone all the immigration procedures, I was told by the Korean Air ground staff that I cannot board my plane. And when I asked them, they said that they received an email from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection under the Department of Homeland Security that I cannot board my plane. So my luggage, which was already checked in, was offloaded from the plane. So in spite my repeated requests for a copy of that email, they did not give me a copy of the email, and no reason was given.
It's interesting because, of course, there have been a number of human rights activists who have been, over the years, barred from coming into the U.S. A few months ago, we were scheduled to interview Papua New Guinean Aboriginal activist named Benny Wenda, and he, too, was barred. Well, can you give us examples of the kinds of human rights violations that have been taking place in the Philippines and that were discussed at the International People's Tribunal? If you had been in Washington, D.C. on Friday, can you give us a taste of what you would have told the tribunal?
Well, I am an expert, supposed to be, I will give an expert testimony on the violation of the right to self-determination of the Filipino people. And specifically, I was supposed to talk about U.S. military intervention in the Philippines, specifically talking about the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement and the Visiting Forces Agreement. You know that in 1991, the two largest U.S. military bases outside of the United States, these are the Subic Naval Base and the Clark Air Base, were left the Philippines because the military bases agreement was terminated at the time. But after that, in 1999, the Philippines and the United States forged an agreement called the Visiting Forces Agreement, which actually caused the return of American forces, American soldiers in our country, and this violates the constitutional prohibitions banning foreign troops on our soil. And last year, in April of last year, another agreement was signed by the two parties, and this was the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which virtually makes the whole Philippines a base for U.S. troops and U.S. military forces.
And so that's how you see the sort of sovereignty of the Philippines being violated by U.S. military forces?
Oh, yes, exactly. Because under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, the United States military and the representative of the armed forces of the Philippines will identify unlimited number of what they call agreed locations, where they will, stockpile their war material, where they will construct facilities, barracks, and houses for thousands of U.S. troops, where these troops will have operational control of these agreed locations, and where even the U.S. Authorities and their contractors and the American contractors will have unhampered access. So really, we are the government of President Aquino, sold our sovereignty and our territorial integrity to the United States.
And how do you connect that to the torture and detention and extrajudicial killings that are happening in the Philippines? Does the presidency, does the regime of Aquino draw impunity or feel like they have impunity because of U.S. support?
Well, yes, there has always been, for the longest time, military assistance, military aid that the United States give to the Philippines. And also the United States train our armed forces, both the military and the police, and even the so-called counterinsurgency program, which is called Oplan Bayanihan, is patterned after the counterinsurgency program, or the COIN of the United States. So precisely, there is a very big connection between the tortures, the illegal arrest and detention, the extrajudicial killings, the disappearances, because these perpetrators of these crimes were trained by the United States forces.
So there's direct training happening. Can you tell us a little bit about what led to the organizing of the International People's Tribunal that took place last week? There's a march happening right now as we are doing this program in Washington, D.C., where people are marching to the State Department and the White House. What led to the formation of this tribunal that you were scheduled to speak at? And as far as you know, how was it received in D.C.?
Well, first of all, the International Tribunal was organized also to inform the international community about what is happening in the Philippines, because maybe some people, because they thought that the most hated dictatorship under the former President Marcos was already out, and therefore all is fine in the Philippines, that we have a real democracy. But that is not true, because human rights violations and all these crimes against the people are still happening. And that is why one of the purposes of this international tribunal was to inform the international community about the real situation in the Philippines. And another one is to seek redress, because the victims, actually there were 34 cases that were heard, and 32 witnesses testified before the tribunal. And they want their cases to be heard because there is a climate of impunity here, because the victims cannot get justice from our formal processes. And the third one is because we want this as a basis for filing complaints or putting these cases before international bodies who would be most likely open to hearing and giving justice to the victims of human rights violations.
And I do want to ask you about the results of the tribunal and where they will head. But can you also tell us a little bit about what some of those who testified, a little bit about them? Melissa Rojas is one young woman. She was actually a guest on Uprising several years ago when she had after she had finally been released from being abducted and tortured. She's actually from Los Angeles, but had traveled to the Philippines and was detained for a number of days and had a horrible experience. There's also among those who testified Bishop Solito Toquero of the United Methodist Church, who also led a rally of poor people and was met with severe violence from forces in the Philippines. How important are the testimonies of people like Melissa Rojas and Bishop Toquero?
Well, these testimonies are important to lay the basis of the culpability of the Aquino government on this violation. I may add also that there is this recent case of Rolly Panessa. He is a security guard, and he was mistaken to be a high-ranking member of the Communist Party of the Philippines, and he was severely tortured, and there was actually a 5 million peso bounty on his head, on the head of this alleged Benjamin Mendoza, who was allegedly the high-ranking member of the Communist Party of the Philippines, to which Rolly Panessa was mistaken for being this Benjamin Mendoza, and that bounty was given to the one who's supposed to be turned him in, and so there is also this aspect of these human rights violations and arrests, that the military also make this blacklisting the activists, arresting them, and things like this as a milking cow for them, So these things are happening, are still happening now.
Well, finally, Lisa, those who testified at the International People's Tribunal also spoke in front of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission to the U.S. Congress. What do you hope will come out of this whole process that took place in Washington, D.C., not just in the U.S. Congress, but also internationally through the United Nations?
Well, first we hope that truth will be heard, that the reality in the Philippines will be seen by the international community as realities of injustice, and that the perpetrators of the crime will be punished, and finally that the Filipino people will get the justice that they deserve.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today. Is there a website that you'd like to give out?
Well, we just want to link you up with the organizations of Bayan, Gabriela, and Karapatan. You can Google them, and we also have organizations like Bayan as a chapter in the U.S.,
right,
in many states, and if you are interested to know more about the Philippines, you can contact these organizations.
And the International People's Tribunal does have a website at internationalpeoplestribunal.org. I want to thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us.
Thank you also.
My guest, Lisa Maza, is a former member of the House of Representatives in the Philippines with the Gabriela Party, and she was scheduled to testify in Washington, D.C. last week. She was actually supposed to arrive in the U.S. in early July, but she was barred from boarding a flight, and she does intend to legally challenge her being barred from coming to the United States. This is Uprising. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali. The latest U.S. Census Bureau numbers released in late June revealed that as of July 1st, Latinos finally surpassed whites as the majority ethnic population in the state of California. That is part of a similar trend in many other parts of the country. But listening to mainstream public radio, you might not know it. The media watchdog group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, or FAIR, just released a new report on the whiteness of NPR. Cleverly titled Some Things Considered, Mostly by White Men, the report found that commentators on shows like Morning Edition and All Things Considered were overwhelmingly white and male. Joining us to discuss the details of the report and why they matter is Janine Jackson. She is the program director of FAIR. She's also the co-host and co-producer of FAIR's syndicated radio show Counterspin. Hi, Janine.
Good morning.
So you specifically looked at commentators. These are people who are asked to give their opinions, not necessarily the hosts of these shows or all the guests, specifically commentators. What defines a commentator?
Commentators are often offering a personal, subjective, you might even say, take on a story. In other words, they're not charged with bringing you the basic facts about the news of the day. It's an opportunity in a news program to have someone sort of go on at length about something which might be a different topic all the time and give their personal take on it. So if you think about it, it's an opportunity for a program to really add different flavors and different perspectives to the program. Unfortunately, that's not what we found NPR doing.
So in a way, it's a very privileged platform where you don't have a back and forth and get necessarily challenged. I mean, certainly you can submit a commentary and they can choose not to air it, but as a commentator, your words are your own, right?
Absolutely. And you're really given a kind of platform to say, you know, my personal feelings about this, my experience is worthwhile, is worth sharing with regard to this issue. Now, a lot of the commentaries that we found were reviews, essentially, movie reviews and book reviews and things like that, which is itself noteworthy, and we can talk about it because it really is a kind of open form space where you're allowing one voice to go on at some length, as you say, uncontested, and the suggestion is that their personal take on things is especially interesting and worth hearing.
So let's talk about which specific shows you looked at. I mentioned Morning Edition, All Things Considered. How many shows was it altogether?
We looked for the first 5 months of this year, January through May. We tried to find who were regular commentators, those who appeared 2 or more times on Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and then also Weekend Edition, Saturday and Sunday. So it was those 4 kind of, if you will, flagship shows in which commentators generally appear that we looked at. But again, we just were looking at, we isolated who speaks more than once, you know, who do you hear from in some sort of regular way. And that came out to just 14 commentators over this period of time, one of whom was a person of color and 3 of whom were women.
Wow. So pretty severely overrepresented in this group are white men.
Absolutely. If you break it down, I mean, with a number like 14, I could tell you they were 79% male and 92% white. But if I say they're 92% white or 8% black, it's important to understand that that whole 8% is all Eric Deggans. You know, that's all one guy and all of his appearances. So it makes sense in this case, I think, to look at the raw numbers. Out of 14, 13 are white and 11 are men.
Any women of color?
No women of color whatsoever.
And of course, that is the group that is often, the demographic that is often the least covered in media in general. And so these flagship NPR shows couldn't even generate one woman of color who had something worth saying as a commentator on a regular basis, is what you've drawn, at least in the first 5 entire months of this year.
That seems to be the case. Now, I want to add one note to that, which is that this weekend, the show on Fridays on All Things Considered, that's called The Week in Politics, and that is a kind of a debate format between E.J. Dionne of the Washington Post and David Brooks of the New York Times. And we can talk about that. But what I will say is occasionally when one of them are on vacation, when Dionne is on vacation, his substitute is sometimes Susie Kim from the New Republic. and she is Asian American. And when Brooks goes on vacation, there are two Indian American men from the National Review who sometimes come in and substitute for him. So on that one show, when the white male hosts are on vacation, there is one Asian American woman and two Indian American men who come in and fill in.
I see. So they're the subs. Now, I want to talk about the increasing rarity of political commentators, but first also let's look at whether you're seeing any kind of a trend. I understand that your organization FAIR has done two similar studies in previous years, 1991 and 2003, which is great because you can measure trends. What have you found just in terms of racial and gender diversity?
Well, yes, because we have been studying NPR for many years now, decades now, we're able to do some kind of longitudinal work. And what we found is that while demographically, in terms of gender and ethnicity, the numbers do look more diverse since 1991, thank goodness. In 1991, they were just 7% women and 4% people of color. But very dishearteningly, the numbers are down from 2003. In 2003, NPR commentators were 24% women and 20% were people of color. So in terms of really showing the range of perspectives and of people that exist in the country in their commentary, NPR has gotten narrower and narrower in the last decade or so.
Wow. Let's talk about the increasing rarity of political commentary, right? NPR is public radio. It's supposed to be publicly funded. Of course, they do increasingly take more and more underwriting from corporations. And one might imagine that as sort of a serious media outlet, that we might see a pretty significant or hefty amount of political commentary. What did you find?
Well, in fact, Sonali, that was really, I mean, the demographics, while they're disheartening, are really not surprising. The drop from 2003 is a little bit surprising, but those kinds of things, the white maleness of NPR was not really a surprise. What did kind of take us aback in looking at this information is the way that NPR appears to have backed off from political commentary. So most of the folks who we found who were regular commentators on NPR were doing arts and entertainment reviews, or we're talking about sports, or we're doing sort of memoir pieces. NPR has exactly one regular commentator.
Janine? We just lost Janine's signal. We're going to call her right back, and she was just in the middle of explaining why there is so little political commentary, or how there is so little political commentary on NPR these days as part of a new study that FAIR just put out. It's called Some Things Considered by Mostly White Men. You can actually find the study online at fair.org, and it's a study of commentators, political or not, all commentators, people who are regularly brought on to express their opinions on a variety of topics. It turns out mostly non-political topics on the shows All Things Considered Morning Edition, as well as Weekend Edition Saturday and Weekend Edition Sunday. And the results were quite surprisingly unsurprising. They were pretty much more of the same. 92% male, 79% white, no women of color, one African-American male regular commentator named Eric Deggans. We're going to bring Janine on the phone since we're having some trouble getting her on video stream. So do bear with us. We do apologize. There's a lot more to discuss as well. FAIR did the same study in 1991 and in 2003, and what they found was that diversity increased between 91 and 2003 and then decreased again. And so we're going to call Janine on the phone now and bring her on with us. She is the program director of FAIR and also co-host and co-producer of FAIR's syndicated radio show Counter Spin, which is a wonderful show syndicated to many, many stations around the country and really gives a regular analysis, media analysis of what's happening in the news. We're actually going to take a short music break while we get her on with us. Do bear with us. We are going to try to bring Janine Jackson right back on Uprising. And welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. We turn back to Janine Jackson, Program Director of FAIR, co-host and co-producer of Counterspin. All right, Janine, you were just explaining how there are so few political commentators now.
Yes, it's true. When we looked at the content of the commentaries on NPR, what we found was that the overwhelming majority of them dealt with arts and entertainment or culture or were sort of personal memoirs, or dealt with sports, for example, and very, very few addressed politics. In fact, of their 14 regular commentators, only one regularly addresses politics, and as I said, that's a BBC reporter named Johnny Diamond who talks about British politics. So 2 segments from this BBC reporter constituted the entirety of the political commentary in that form during this 5 months. And what's remarkable to us about that is that it really is a change. It really is a change at NPR. When we looked at them in 1991, we found 29 segments on international affairs, commentaries, 21 on U.S. politics, and 7 on economics. And that study was smaller. It only looked at 4 months and not 5 months. In 2003, 18% of the commentary dealt with U.S. politics, 4% international politics. So it really represents what seems like a decision on NPR's part to pull away from allowing individuals to express political ideas in commentary throughout the week. Now, what they've done, though, Sonali, is to corral all of the political commentary into this one show that I mentioned, Week in Politics, that usually airs on Fridays. That's where you get your political commentary on NPR. And who is that? It's a Washington Post reporter debating a New York Times reporter on, public broadcasting that's specifically tasked, and this is what's so infuriating, that's specifically tasked with providing an alternative to commercial media and with providing a space where we can hear voices that we would not hear otherwise. So it's certainly not doing that.
So it's interesting to hear that NPR is diluting its, the kind of hard-hitting political coverage, whether you agree with their perspectives or not. And I'm wondering if you think that that's in response to a lot of right-wing attacks on NPR's politics, because to the right wing, NPR is a far-left radical, communist outlet.
Well, this is, of course, the history of not just NPR, but of also PBS, which is that because they are such a political football, because they must always beg for their congressional funding, and that can always be sort of dangled over their head, they always have been a subject of intense conservative pressure from the right wing, who are very audible in complaining to folks like NPR when they hear anything that they feel is, or that just because they think there are not enough conservative voices on the air. This has been a standard technique of conservative media critics for at least 25 years. It's nothing new at all.
Right.
But what we see is NPR seeming to want to respond to that by being safe, by putting all their politics in one kind of point-counterpoint show, and sort of saying, well, you can't say we don't have a debate, because it's much scarier, of course, to allow individuals to offer their own take on political issues throughout the week. That's less easy to control.
And Janine, I understand that as a sidebar, you also looked at Fresh Air, hosted, of course, by Terry Gross, and you found not a single non-white commentator on Fresh Air?
That's true. All 9 regular commentators, those who appear twice or more often on Fresh Air, were white. None were people of color, and just 1 of those 9 was a woman.
Wow. Doesn't NPR realize, and going back to this issue of diversity, stepping away from the political coverage, doesn't NPR realize they have to keep up with changing demographics? I can't imagine that they're ignorant of that.
Well, if you read their policy statements, they are very interested in that. In fact, in 2014, just last year, NPR's board of directors released this new strategic plan, and it said specifically that they wanted a newsroom that reflected the fabric of America, and that they wanted to be leaders. They wanted to be leaders on, quote, stories at the intersection of race, ethnicity, and culture, close quote. Well, if 71% of your commentators are white men, then you're not really leading in that area, I would have to say.
Well, Janine, I can't resist but say how proud I am of Pacifica Radio, KPFK in particular, our morning schedule being dominated by women and also having wonderful racial, gender, and political representation. Thank you so much. And as same goes, of course, to your organization and your program, Janine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Janine Jackson is the program director of FAIR, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. She's the co-host and co-producer of FAIR's syndicated radio show Counterspin. And again, you can find out more at fair.org. The results of that new study are up there. This is Uprising. Anna Buss is our assistant producer, our technical director. Christian Beck is our production coordinator. Kiana Turner is our visual editor, research intern, and today's audio engineer. Special thanks to Jonathan Alexander for technical assistance. Annie Mendoza is our social media coordinator. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/uprisingwithsonali. Our website is uprisingwithsonali.com. Our theme music is by Quetzal. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer of Uprising. I'll see you next time.